The first morning I saw Garrett Holloway's soul, I understood that everything he had built would eventually be taken apart piece by piece, and that I would be the one to start. I have seen souls my entire life. Not in any mystical, floating way. More like a glow that sits just beneath a person's skin, the way light sits under a lampshade. Most souls are pale gold or soft blue, streaked with darker patches, dented in places, cracked along edges where life had pressed too hard. People carry their damage the way old furniture carries its scratches. You learn to read it. You learn not to say anything about it. Garrett Holloway walked into Millhaven Elementary on a Tuesday morning in September, and I felt the temperature in the hallway change. His soul was not dark. It was not shadowed. It was not the murky gray I sometimes saw in people who were quietly miserable and making everyone around them pay for it. His soul was black. Completely, flatly, absolutely black. The color of a window with nothing behind it. I pressed my back against the shelves in the library entrance and watched him shake hands with the superintendent. He laughed at something the woman beside him said. His teeth were very white and very even. The superintendent laughed too, leaning slightly toward him the way people lean toward warmth. I had seen maybe 4 black souls in my entire life. A man at a gas station when I was 11. A woman at my mother's church who ran the food pantry and skimmed donations for 6 years before anyone noticed. A contractor who built the community center downtown and used materials so far below spec that 3 years later the roof needed complete replacement, though by then he was in another state with another contract. I had said nothing about any of them. My grandmother gave me a silver coin when I was 8 years old. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. The coin was worn smooth on one side. On the other side there was an owl, its features so rubbed with age that the wings and the eyes had nearly merged into each other. She said, "Not every truth needs to be spoken aloud." I understood that she was talking about my gift. I understood that she was telling me to protect myself. For 26 years I had done exactly that. I put the coin in my cardigan pocket and went back to the library. I had a cart of returns to shelve. The 3rd graders were coming in after lunch for story time. There were 47 overdue notices to send. There was work to do, and I did it, and I did not think about the new principal's black soul for the rest of that day. I thought about it that night, lying in my apartment with the window open and the sound of Millhaven settling into quiet. I thought about it the way you think about a bad smell you cannot locate. It was there. I could not make it not be there. I had worked at Millhaven Elementary for 9 years. I knew every teacher, every aide, every family that came through for the book fair. I knew which kids ate their lunches in the library because the cafeteria was too loud. I knew which parents left voicemails at 7 in the morning because they were worried about their children reading below grade level. I had watched children grow from the nervous 1st graders who looked at the picture books like they were trying to decode a foreign language into confident 4th and 5th graders who carried chapter books under their arms like talismans. I loved that library. I loved that job. I went to sleep telling myself that a black soul was not evidence of a crime. 3 weeks into the school year, Garrett held his first all-staff meeting. He stood at the front of the multipurpose room in a charcoal blazer and talked about innovation. He used that word 8 times in 20 minutes. I counted. He talked about accountability, about excellence, about the community's expectations. He had a gift for speaking in a way that felt specific without actually committing to anything. Teachers nodded. The superintendent's representative sitting in the back row took notes. Then he asked Alicia Brooks to stand up. Alicia taught 4th grade. She had been at Millhaven for 14 years. She kept a small cactus on her desk that she had owned for 11 of those years and had named Gerald. She remembered the names of her former students' siblings. She stayed until 6 o'clock on Thursdays helping struggling readers. Garrett said her name with a smile. He said he had reviewed the Q2 enrollment reports and noticed a discrepancy in her class numbers. He said it in the same tone he had used to say innovation. Warm. Measured. Reasonable. He said, "I wonder, Alicia, if you could tell us all how a classroom of 22 students appears in your records as 20 on the October submission." Alicia's face went through several expressions very quickly. Confusion, then recognition, then something careful. She said the records were updated in November to reflect the 2 mid-semester transfers, and she had submitted an amendment through the district system. Garrett smiled wider. He said he would need to see that amendment. He said the current record did not reflect it. He said, and here the smile did not waver even slightly, that he hoped this was simply an oversight, because accuracy in reporting was something he took very seriously in his school. The room was very quiet. Teachers looked at their folders or at their hands. Alicia said, of course. She said she would pull the amendment documentation today. She said she was sorry for any confusion. She should not have apologized. She had done nothing wrong. But the room was very quiet and Garrett was still smiling and she apologized anyway, and he nodded once as though receiving something that was owed to him. I watched his soul pulse once in the fluorescent light of that multipurpose room. Black and absolutely still, the way only things with no doubt about themselves are still. That was October. In November, the district held its annual fundraiser dinner at the Riverside Inn on the edge of town. Garrett had taken over the planning and upgraded the venue and invited 3 local business sponsors. There were centerpieces. There were assigned seats. There was a printed program with his photo on the inside cover. Tom Wexler had been the night custodian at Millhaven for 11 years. He was 61 and had served 2 tours in the military and had moderate hearing loss from his service. He wore hearing aids in both ears and generally kept to himself and kept the building immaculate, which in my experience was a form of pride that deserved respect. Tom was at the dinner because Garrett had made attendance mandatory for all staff. He sat at the far end of a table near the kitchen, eating quietly, speaking to no one because he had difficulty in rooms with a lot of ambient sound, and this room had a lot of ambient sound. During the cocktail hour, Garrett found him. I was not close enough to hear what was said. I saw Garrett stop beside Tom, say something, then turn to the 2 businessmen flanking him and say something else. The 3 of them laughed. Tom's expression did not change, but his hand, holding a glass of sparkling water, tightened. I could see his knuckles from where I stood. Later I asked Meredith from the front office what had been said. She looked at the middle distance for a moment before answering. She said Garrett had asked Tom loudly, very loudly, if he needed the hors d'oeuvres menu translated into sign language. She said Garrett had explained to the businessmen that Tom sometimes needed things repeated because of his service. She said the word service had landed like a compliment in Garrett's delivery, which was what made it so difficult to address directly. Tom finished his dinner and left 40 minutes early. I watched him go. In December, I was shelving the new arrivals in the back of the library when I heard voices from the direction of the supply closet that connected to my space. The supply closet had a door into my room and a door into the hallway. The hallway door was closed. My door was open, the way it always was. I recognized Garrett's voice immediately. The other voice was softer. Diane Cortez, from Human Resources. I heard him say the words restructuring and position elimination and fiscal responsibility. I heard him say that the district was watching overhead carefully and that her role, as currently structured, was not sustainable going forward. I heard him say this was not personal. I heard Diane say, very quietly, that she had 3 children and a mortgage and she had been in this district for 8 years. I heard him say he understood that this was difficult news and that he would do everything he could to support a smooth transition. I stood very still behind the cart of books. The fluorescent light hummed above me. After a moment, I heard the hallway door open and close. Diane came through the supply closet into my library. She stopped when she saw me. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she said, "I need to get back to my office." Her voice was very controlled. She walked through without stopping. I put the book in my hand back on the cart. That was December 14th. I remember the date because it was the day we were setting up for the winter reading fair, and I had counted the book display stands twice already that morning and the number kept coming up short. January began cold and still, the way January in Millhaven always begins, with frost on the library windows every morning and the radiators ticking. I had been thinking about the spreadsheet for weeks. Not the spreadsheet itself. I had not seen it again. The image of it stayed. The columns. The header row with its neat categories. Priority. Transfer. Removal. The names beside each entry. The sums to the right. Maya Bennett. Removal. Parent unable to contribute. Maya was in 2nd grade. She came to the library every Thursday with her class. She had curly red hair and a way of pulling her bottom lip between her teeth when deciding which book to pick. She had checked out the same book about horses 3 times, and I had never said anything because some books are like that. I thought about Maya Bennett, and I thought about the word removal, and I thought about what it meant for a school administrator to put a 7-year-old's name in a spreadsheet column, beside a notation about her parents' inability to contribute. I thought about all of it for 3 weeks. I did not say anything to anyone. Then I started to think about the fact that I had spent my entire adult life not saying anything about anything. I went back through the school's public financial disclosures first. They were online, filed with the district annually. The numbers in them told a clear story when you knew what you were looking for, which I did not yet, but I was learning. I requested a consultation with a woman named Patricia Lowe at a legal aid office in Portland. I told her I had observed what appeared to be financial irregularities in a public school's enrollment practices. She asked me for specifics. I gave her the spreadsheet. I had photographed it on my phone the night I saw it, standing in the dim blue light of Garrett's monitor, his footsteps audible behind me near the printer, my hands completely steady. Patricia Lowe looked at the photograph for a long time. She said that if the document was what it appeared to be, this was potentially a Title VI issue and possibly a state education code violation. She said she knew someone I should speak with. She wrote a name on a card and slid it across the desk. The name on the card was Nora Keat. Nora Keat was a journalist at the Cascade Courier, which was a small regional paper that did the kind of work small regional papers do when they have people who care about it. I called the number on the card on a Wednesday morning from the parking lot of a coffee shop 3 towns over, because I did not entirely trust the instinct, but I acted on it anyway. Nora answered on the 2nd ring. She said, before I could explain why I was calling, that Patricia had already been in touch, and she was interested in talking. We met at a diner in Bellevue that same week. I ordered coffee I did not drink. Nora ordered nothing and arrived already eating a granola bar from her coat pocket, which told me something about her. She was in her late 30s. Her hair was cut short, and she wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and pushed them up her nose approximately every 40 seconds throughout our conversation. On the table beside her coffee cup was a watch. Not a smartwatch. A mechanical watch with a worn leather strap, the kind with a visible second hand that moved in the tiny incremental steps of an actual mechanism rather than the smooth sweep of an electronic one. She picked it up and turned it in her fingers several times while I spoke, then set it back down without looking at it. I would learn later that the watch had been her father's. I told her what I had seen. The spreadsheet. The categories. The names. The sums. She asked if I had the photograph. I slid my phone across the table. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then she asked 3 questions in quick succession. She asked when exactly I had seen this. She asked whether I had any corroborating documentation from public records. She asked whether I was willing to have my name attached to anything she published. I said yes to the 3rd question without hesitating. She nodded once. She picked up the watch and turned it in her fingers again. Then she put it in her pocket. She said, okay. She said, I'm going to need some time. Over the next 6 weeks, we met 4 more times. Each time Nora arrived with more material than she had left with. She had obtained financial records through public records requests. She had spoken with 7 families whose children appeared in the spreadsheet. She had documentation of 3 cases where children in the removal column had been quietly redirected to other schools mid-year with paperwork that appeared routine, but followed a pattern when you looked at them together. 3 of the families had spoken to her on the record. One of them was a woman named Patricia Reed, whose husband Malcolm had asked Garrett directly at a parent meeting about a mid-year transfer recommendation for their daughter and had been told it was about program fit. Malcolm Reed's daughter was 8 and had been at Millhaven for 2 years. She was not in any academic difficulty. Her teachers had given her strong marks across every category. The Reeds had declined the transfer. Their daughter had remained in the school. 3 months later, Garrett had declined to renew the contract of their daughter's teacher, Alicia Brooks, for the following year, citing budget realignment. Alicia had said nothing publicly, but Nora found her and Alicia agreed to speak. I saw Alicia once during those weeks, in the parking lot after school. She was loading boxes into her car. I did not know yet whether she had spoken to Nora. I waved. She waved back and then looked away quickly, the way people look away when they are carrying something they have not yet decided whether to put down. Meanwhile, I had signed a contract. The Portland Public Library System had posted an opening for a head of collections development in November. I had applied in December, mostly because the job was there and I was qualified and applying for it required no commitment to actually leaving. I had worked at Millhaven for 9 years, and the thought of leaving sat inside me like a weight I kept lifting to see how heavy it really was. They offered me the position in February. The salary was higher. The scope was larger. The library was 3 times the size of the school library and served a population I had never worked with, and I would be starting something entirely new at 34, which was not old, but was old enough to feel the shape of the risk clearly. I signed the contract at my kitchen table on a Sunday night with a cup of chamomile tea going cold beside me. I put the silver coin on the table while I signed, not for any particular reason. It was just there, in my pocket the way it always was, and I took it out and set it beside the contract, and then I signed my name. I gave the school notice the following Monday. I said I was relocating for a family opportunity. Garrett received this information with the expression he used for all information that was not about him, which was polite and slightly absent. He said he was sorry to lose me. He shook my hand. After that, something shifted in how he treated me. It was subtle. The kind of subtle that you only notice if you have been paying close attention to someone for several months, which I had. He stopped including me in hallway conversations. Not dramatically. Just a slight pivot of his body, a topic concluded slightly more quickly when I appeared. A follow-up email from him about the library's spring budget that was CC'd to my supervisor rather than sent to me directly. He watched me sometimes, in the way people watch things they are trying to categorize. I watched him back. His soul remained black. It did not flicker. It did not dim. It had none of the internal weather that even difficult souls usually had, the small storms of guilt or uncertainty or regret that moved through people even when they refused to act on them. His was simply black, and in the months I had spent in proximity to it, I had come to understand that this was not depression or damage or grief. It was the absence of the mechanism that processes those things. He simply did not have it. In March, Nora called me on a Thursday evening and said she was ready to publish. She said the piece was completed and edited and scheduled to go live the following Saturday at 6 in the morning. She told me this because she believed in informing sources before publication, especially sources whose names would appear in the story. She asked if I had any concerns. I said no. She said, okay. She paused, and I heard the small ticking of the mechanical watch in the silence, and then she said, I want you to know that this is solid. Every document was verified. Every source was confirmed. This is the most carefully checked piece I have published in 8 years of doing this work. I believed her. The Millhaven Elementary Annual Benefit Dinner was held on the last Saturday of March at the Harrison Hotel in Portland. The school had used the venue twice before, but never for an event of this scale. Garrett had organized sponsors. He had organized a keynote address. He had organized a commendation from the district superintendent honoring his first year of leadership. I was invited because I was still technically staff for 3 more weeks. I went because Nora had told me the article was publishing that morning and I wanted to be there. The Harrison Hotel had a ballroom with a ceiling that was very high and hung with lights that looked like stars if you did not look at them directly. The tables had white cloths and the centerpieces were small arrangements of white flowers. The programs on each plate were printed on heavy cardstock. Garrett's photograph was inside the front cover. He was looking slightly off camera in the photo, the way people look in photos when they want to appear to be thinking about something important. I arrived at 7:15. The room was already half full. Teachers, administrators, board members, parents. I found my table near the back wall, which suited me. I sat down with a glass of water and looked at the room. Alicia Brooks was at a table near the center. She was wearing a dark blue dress and talking to a woman I did not recognize. She did not look at me when I came in. Malcolm Reed was standing near the bar with his wife Patricia. He was a tall man with close-cropped gray hair and a way of holding his shoulders that suggested he was accustomed to patience. Patricia was speaking to him quietly. He nodded, watching the room. Garrett arrived at 7:30. He was wearing a dark suit and his white shirt had very small silver cufflinks that caught the light when he moved his hands, which he did often. He worked the room with an efficiency that could have been mistaken for warmth. He stopped at every table. He remembered names. He touched shoulders. He laughed at the right moments. His soul was black and the lights of the Harrison Hotel played across his face, and he smiled and the room smiled back. Dinner was served at 8. The speeches began at 8:45. The superintendent spoke first. Then a representative from the district school board. Then the president of the parent association, who had a sticker on his lapel that said Harrison Falls PTA and who thanked Garrett 3 times in 90 seconds. At 9:15, Garrett took the stage. He was a good speaker. I will not deny that. He had a quality that drew attention without demanding it, the way a sound in an otherwise silent room draws your ear. He spoke about what the school community meant to him. He spoke about the children. He used Maya Bennett's name, which was the moment I found it most difficult to remain in my seat. He described her love of reading. He said this was why he was here. The applause was sincere. At 9:30, a member of the board named Catherine Shaw, who sat 3 tables from me, reached for her phone. She looked at the screen. Her expression did not change, but she did not put the phone down. She was reading something. Beside her, another board member took out his phone. Then the man on his other side. In the front of the room, Garrett was accepting a framed commendation from the superintendent. He was holding it with both hands and smiling at the camera set up near the stage. At 9:32, I heard the first phone ring. It rang and was quickly silenced, but then another rang and another, and then phones were simply lighting up on tables around the room without ringing because people had already silenced them. The light from the screens was blue and cold, and it spread across the room in small flickers, like something was catching. Garrett noticed. You could see it in the slight change in his posture. The way his chin came up a fraction of an inch. A board member near the stage walked to the AV technician and said something. The technician looked at his phone and then at the board member and then nodded. He moved to the laptop at the side of the stage. On the large projection screen that had been showing a slow rotation of school photographs, text appeared. The headline of Nora's article. And then the article itself, scrolling slowly. The room was very quiet for about 5 seconds. Then Malcolm Reed pushed back his chair. He stood up. He was looking at the stage, at Garrett, with an expression that was not angry the way anger usually looks. It was quiet and very final. He said, loudly enough that I heard him from the back of the room, "Did you threaten my daughter over money?" The sentence landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. The rings of it spread outward. Garrett started to say something. He said, "Malcolm," and then he said, "I think there may be some misunderstanding here," and then his voice disappeared because the AV system had cut the stage microphone, though I do not know whether that was deliberate or accidental. Catherine Shaw had taken off her reading glasses. She was holding them in one hand and a printout in the other. Someone near the AV station had printed pages from the article. She was reading the printout the way you read something the second time when the first reading has already changed something in you and you need to confirm it. Across the room, Alicia Brooks stood up from her table. She did not say anything. She picked up her bag and her program and she walked toward the exit. When she passed the stage, she did not look at Garrett. She looked straight ahead. I could see from where I sat that she was crying, silently, her face controlled and her eyes straight, and the crying was not grief the way grief usually looks. It was something older and more exhausted than grief. The man from the corporate sponsor, who had been seated at Garrett's table for the dinner, stood up. He extended his hand toward Garrett, who extended his automatically, and then the man withdrew his hand and shook his head once, a small tight motion, and walked toward the back of the room. Garrett was still standing at the podium. He had the framed commendation in one hand. The other hand was resting on the podium surface. In front of him on the podium, almost at the edge, was a glass of water. On the projection screen behind him, the spreadsheet photograph that Nora had included in the article appeared. It was very large. The columns were legible. The headers were legible. The names were legible. Garrett reached for the glass of water. His hand was not steady. The glass caught the edge of his fingers and slipped and fell forward off the podium and hit the stage floor and did not break, but the water spread across the wood in a wide arc. The sound it made was small and very clear in the quiet room. He looked down at it. Then he looked at the projection screen. His soul in that moment was still black. I had half expected something to change in it, some crack, some lightening toward gray. There was nothing. But his face, which was not his soul, had something in it that I recognized not from kindness or guilt, but from calculation. He was still, even now, trying to figure out whether there was a play. I watched him figure out that there was not. I was asked 3 questions that evening before the dinner completely disbanded. One by a board member who wanted to confirm when I had first photographed the spreadsheet. One by a district administrator who asked whether I had shared the document with anyone other than the journalist. One by a parent I did not know who asked simply, "How long had you known?" That question was the hardest one. I said, "I saw the document in November," which was true. I did not say the rest of it. I did not say I had known something was wrong from the first Tuesday morning in September when I pressed my back against the library shelves and watched his soul not glow. I answered the questions I was asked. That was enough. The drive back to Millhaven took 40 minutes. I made it in silence, no radio, the highway going dark and empty in the late hour, the windows fogged slightly at the edges. I thought about Alicia Brooks walking out of that ballroom with tears on her face and her eyes straight ahead. I thought about Tom Wexler at the dinner in November, his hand tightening on his glass. I thought about Maya Bennett pulling her lip between her teeth, deciding between books. 3 weeks later, the school board voted to terminate Garrett's contract. The state education department opened a formal inquiry. 2 of the families whose children had been redirected filed complaints. Meredith from the front office gave a statement. Diane Cortez gave a statement. Alicia Brooks gave a statement. I gave mine in writing. It was 3 pages. I stated every fact I had directly observed or documented. I stated the dates and the circumstances. I did not state that I had known from the beginning because I had seen his soul and his soul was black, because some things cannot be placed in a formal statement without undermining the rest of it. I was packing the last boxes in my library on a Friday when I heard the door. He came in alone. He was wearing the same dark suit from the dinner, but without the jacket, which was the first time I had seen him without a jacket. He looked like a different category of person without it. Smaller. Not physically smaller. Just less of a thing. He said my name. He said, "I think you owe me an explanation." I kept packing. I had a cart of books to return to the district warehouse, and I was working through it methodically. He said, "I had a family." He said, "I had a career I spent 15 years building." He said, "Whatever you think you saw in that spreadsheet, you took something that could have been handled internally and you turned it into a public spectacle for what? For a story in a paper nobody reads?" I stopped packing. I turned around. His soul was still black. Even now, even here, even in the wreckage of everything he had done, there was nothing in it that resembled recognition. I put my hand in my cardigan pocket and took out the coin. I turned it once in my fingers. The owl on it was worn almost smooth. My grandmother's hands had worn it smooth, and her mother's before hers, and I did not know how many women in my family had held it before it came to me, but I knew the weight of all of them in it. I said, "I didn't destroy anything." He started to say something, and I said, I stopped being silent. "That's all." He said, "You could have come to me directly." I thought about Alicia apologizing for something she had not done. I thought about Tom Wexler's hand on his glass. I thought about Diane Cortez walking through my library with her voice controlled and her eyes dry. I said, "Everything that happened was done by you." He did not answer that. He stood in the doorway of the library that had been mine for 9 years, and he had no answer for it because there is no answer for a plain fact. After a moment he turned and walked out. I stood in the empty library and held the coin and listened to his footsteps go down the hallway. The sound of them grew smaller and then disappeared, and the building settled back into its quiet. I finished packing. On my last day, I went through every room I had used. The back catalog room. The repair station where we mended damaged books with archival tape and patience. The reading corner with its low shelves and its beanbag chairs worn soft with years of use. I straightened things that did not need straightening. I was not stalling. I was just letting myself look. I drove to Portland the following Sunday. My apartment had a kitchen window that looked into a courtyard where a man kept planters of spring bulbs. That first morning, I stood at the window with my coffee and watched him water them. The new library was very large. 3 floors, a children's wing, an archive room, a digital lab. My first week was full of names and systems and the specific calibration of learning a new place. On Wednesday of my first week, a child came in with her mother, and the child had that particular way of looking at a room full of books that I had seen so many times in so many children and never stopped recognizing. I watched the child pick out a book and carry it to the checkout desk, and I thought about Millhaven and about Maya Bennett and about all the names on a spreadsheet that had belonged to children who did not know their names were on it. The investigation produced findings in April. The formal report documented a pattern of enrollment manipulation tied to donation status that had affected 23 students over Garrett's single year at the district. 2 of the cases met the threshold for referral to the state attorney general's office. Nora Keats' article was cited 4 times in the report. Nora sent me a text the day the report was released. It said, "You did good." She was not a person who said things she did not mean. I put the silver coin on the windowsill of my office in the new library on my first day. Not in my pocket. On the windowsill, where the afternoon light hit it and the owl on its face, worn as it was, caught the sun. I went back to work. The child with the book about horses was at the desk. The librarian at the checkout was scanning it with a patience I recognized as genuine rather than performed. The light through the windows of the Portland Public Library was the particular quality of Pacific Northwest afternoon light, gray and even and somehow clear despite itself. I have spent my whole life seeing things other people do not see. For years I thought the hard part was the seeing. But the seeing was never the hard part. The hard part was knowing what to do with it afterward. Sitting with the weight of what you know and deciding whether the cost of speaking is less than the cost of silence. Understanding that those costs change depending on what the silence is covering. My grandmother was not telling me to always be silent. She was telling me to choose. Not every truth needs to be spoken aloud is not the same as no truth ever does. It took me 26 years and a black soul in a school hallway to understand the difference. The coin sits on my windowsill. The owl looks out. Now I want to ask you something real. If you had spent your whole life knowing things before other people did, seeing damage before it arrived, danger before it happened, would you have done what I did? Or would you have kept quiet, the way I kept quiet for so long? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe, because there are more stories coming, and some of them are even harder than this one.